Good evening. Welcome and thank you for coming tonight to this important community meeting concerning the impact of underage drinking and substance use in social host law. I would also like to thank the Tewksbury Public Schools School Committee and Superintendent Chris Malone and Assistant Superintendent Brenda Regan for their support of this night. It is important that as a community we work together to keep our children safe no matter their age. For the third year, we are fortunate to partner with both Tewksbury Police Chief Tim Sheehan and Middlesex District Attorney Marion Ryan for this meeting. The most recent research on the adolescent brain shows that in the presence of peers, teens take more risks compared to when they are alone. In fact, the number of car crashes involving teens was 3 times higher when there were peers in the car compared to crashes involving teens driving alone. It is their developing brains that make teenagers vulnerable to risky behavior and at the same time makes them more receptive as learners and more responsive to the environment around them. Teaching adolescents self-regulation is effective based on their brain development. As a result, the decisions we make as the adults in our children's lives around alcohol use and what is allowed in our homes teaches them how to self-regulate and make better decisions when with their peers. We hope that this night provides opportunities for reflection and conversations with your children about alcohol, substance use, and making positive decisions. At this time, I would like to introduce Tewksbury Police Chief Tim Sheehan.
Thank you, Principal Vogel, Superintendent Malone, and Middlesex District Attorney Marion Ryan, who just left the Ryan School on a social media presentation for parents relative to their kids' activity on social media. I was over there with her and I ran out ahead of her so that I could get going, so that we don't have to keep you here for so long. But my name's Tim Sheehan. I am your police chief. I've been a police officer in the town of Tewksbury for 32 years. I've raised my children here in Tewksbury. I have a son that's almost 30, a daughter that'll be 29 in April, and another daughter that'll be 27 in August. All 3 of my kids went through the middle school here and came through the high school, and most of the issues that you have as parents with your children, I had with mine, and always had to find creative ways to work through those. So. Tonight isn't about me telling you that there is one great way to handle all kinds of conflicts that you have with your child and to help them make good decisions. It's about providing you with a little bit of information, asking you to partner with myself, the school department, and the district attorney to try to help our kids get through supposed to be a really special time for them, the junior prom, and then on to their senior year and their senior prom and their senior activities as well. As Principal Vogel had mentioned, just to provide you with a little bit of statistical data, traffic deaths among teens much higher between March 1st and May 31st than any other time of the year, for the same very reason why we're here tonight, because there's a lot of activities that occur, a lot of social gatherings, a lot of things to celebrate, and we want to make sure that the kids actually have a good opportunity to do those things. Obviously alcohol is the #1 drug of choice amongst teens, even though prescription medication is crawling up on it. Alcohol is still, and it's, and that fact itself is very scary. So at this particular time, we want your kids to have the best time possible. We want them to enjoy their time in their tux with their flowers and their gowns and having little get-togethers before and after the prom, and really make themselves really good memories. We don't want them to introduce alcohol or any other substances into those periods of time, because that will not allow them to make good memories. There'll be bad memories. They won't have memories at all, and the memories they have, they won't be carrying with them. The one thing that we would like to emphasize tonight is it's our intention to try to help get your kids to their dreams, to get them to college, to get them, if they want to go into the military, to get them to their dream job. without any charges because they made poor decisions that have prohibited them from either going to college. One of the things the district attorney just mentioned in front of the Ryan School parents that we were talking about is kids that are convicted of felonious acts. They don't avail their parents to any federal student aid when they're applying for college, which a lot of parents rely on that so they can get their kids to really good schools that they can't otherwise afford. So some consequences like that, underlying consequences, kids that are convicted of crimes will be prohibited from becoming police officers or firefighters if that's their dream. And they don't think about that because for very good reason that their brains aren't matured in the part of their brain. So I'm going to get into a little bit of a presentation, talk to you a little bit about that first. I don't know if I should be aiming this, oh, there. So it just tells you right now about alcohol in the developing brain. Primarily, everybody in this room has probably heard it a million times, but a child, that makes a lot of noise. The developing brain, it's not completely developed until the mid-20s for kids. And the part that doesn't develop is the part that, that kids, their decision-making and their risky behavior. Not all parts of the adolescent brain mature, obviously, at the same time. Differences in maturation among parts of the brain can result in impulsive decisions and a disregard for consequences. How alcohol affects the brain, you can see lots of various things up here that I don't need to get into too much. It's really about making decisions. It does a lot of terrible things to the body when kids are introducing alcohol into their body, about lowering their heart rate. It chills the body. It impacts their problem solving, their impulse control, their ability to think, speak. They move slower. Obviously, the reaction time. If these kids are driving, which is so terrible if that is the case, they could hurt themselves. Now it's probably been about 2 years since we had Keith Brooks up here. Kevin Brooks, excuse me, from Drive to Save Lives. He was in a wheelchair, paraplegic, spoke to all the kids in an assembly here. I think it was probably the quietest assembly I've ever seen in the history that I've been coming to assemblies at the high school. Really connected with the kids on their level. Was at a high school party, was drinking with a friend, left. He was driving, got in a car accident, took the life of his friend and put himself in that chair for the rest of his life. And he was hoping and praying that his message would send a good message to the kids that he spoke in front of. Not 2 weeks later, we had that horrific incident that involved the young Tewksbury youth that was at a party, and there was some drinking involved, and it resulted in the loss of his life. So as you can see, even though the kids were in tune with the presentation, they saw what was going on. They really related to him. They asked him a lot of questions, sent him posts afterwards because he got back to us. They made some pretty poor decisions within a couple weeks after that, because they're kids, and that's what happens, and that's why we need the parents in this room to partner with us to try to get them through that period. I just wanted to play a little video that shows a little bit about that.
Understanding substance use and abuse. Misuse of substances like alcohol and drugs is a growing problem in the U.S., and teens and young adults are most at risk, with half of all new drug users being under the age of 18, and 1 in 5 high school students having abused prescription drugs. Additionally, 1/3 of high school students currently use alcohol, 23% use marijuana, and 22% use all forms of tobacco combined. Decision-making in teens involves a chemical called dopamine in the brain's reward center. Dopamine helps transmit signals in the brain that make people feel happy. The number of brain receptors interacting with dopamine is higher in adolescence than at any other time of life. That means that when a teen is exposed to a reward, such as a compliment, the reward center reacts more strongly than it would for an adult. Also, being with friends increases the sensitivity to rewards and makes the already sensitive reward system even more sensitive. Feeling rewards more strongly and responding more intensely to what peers may think means that there are biological reasons for why teens sometimes decide to do things with their friends that they would never do on their own. This can be positive by encouraging friends to take on new challenges, but it can also lead to dangerous decisions such as drug and alcohol use. Drug use and abuse can contribute to harmful short- and long-term health risks. In fact, drug abuse can have long-term effects on a developing teenage brain. MRI scans of the brain have shown that people who have been using drugs for a long time have a smaller prefrontal cortex than people who have not been using drugs. The prefrontal cortex is the area where decision-making occurs. Drug use can result in poor grades, memory loss, and social problems. A lot of us have an idea about what a person dependent on drugs looks like. However, anyone can suffer from this type of addiction. Addiction doesn't depend on income, job, age, race, or color. It is a disease of the brain that can happen to anyone. Drug dependency is when a person consumes alcohol or drugs regularly, despite the fact that it causes issues in their life and relationships with others. Get help if you need it. Encourage your friends to get help too. If you or someone you love is struggling with drug use or abuse, call 1-800-662-HELP or visit www.easyread.drugabuse.gov.
So, with that being said, because I think we've highlighted now, and really highlighted that there's a strong possibility that the kids won't make necessarily good decisions, I just want to talk a little bit about the law. So, from our perspective, obviously, I think everybody in this room, and the DA will talk about the social host law and the implications and the liability associated with that, and just the overall catastrophic consequences associated with hosting a party and allowing underage kids to drink. But it is against the law. For kids, anybody that's in possession or transporting alcohol or carrying alcohol that's under the age face consequences associated with the law. And whoever sells alcohol, like a clerk at a store, or somebody that an older brother or somebody that may be looking to make a few bucks that will purchase alcohol for a youth that is looking to make a poor decision on that evening, is also subject to provisions within the statute and could face consequences up to and including being arrested. So what is Tewksbury Police Department doing? I think I don't know if there's anybody in this room that doesn't know Maria Ruggiero, who is here, I believe, or she hasn't come over from the Ryan School yet, but she's here on a grant, but she's here as a full-time prevention specialist. She works with the school directly to develop programs, to try to introduce education, to try to give the kids the best opportunity to learn, the poor behaviors associated with consuming any kind of substances. But she tries to do it in a fun way and try to engage the kids and get their thoughts and try to provide education to bring them to a point where they themselves come to the conclusion that introducing substances isn't the best thing to do when you're looking to have a successful high school, middle school, college career. So what are we doing in the police department? We're doing a lot of prevention education. We enforce the laws because that's our job to do that. So we do make arrests of those that are under the influence of alcohol, both operating vehicles and ones that are selling alcohol to youths and people that are buying alcohol to youths. We try to, before we arrest a youth for being in possession of alcohol, we really rely heavily and try to partner with the parent first. But if that isn't working, arrest is another option for us to try to get the youth back on track and to try to make it so that they can, live a good life and get to their goals. Collaboration, which is what we count on with the district attorney's office, who also provides a lot of education. We'll stand before you tonight and tell you about a lot of things that are going on in the DA's office that will help your kids get through the tough time. But we collaborate with the Lowell District Court and a lot of treatment providers in this area, and we have our own full-time mental health and substance use clinician, our own outreach program, so that if any of you are having problems with your kids because they're experimenting with alcohol or drugs, you can turn to us and ask us to help you, because we can help you, and that doesn't have to involve the court system. Never, I can say hardly ever, but never involves the court system. We can get your kids the kind of help they need in the counseling, get them back on track, get them back to the position where they can live out really good lives. And then the last thing is just talking a little bit about our outreach program that we have. So these are some of the things that we work, that we do on the prevention side. Every student, I shouldn't step away from the mic too much, but every student in the school system here in Tewksbury, that goes through the school system at the 4th grade level, is introduced to police officers at the Rad Kids program. It's integrated in the curriculum of the schools. We're very fortunate for the partnership that we have with the school department. They're very forward-thinking. And our officers that teach this program then start teaching your kids about the right and wrong, about social media behavior, about bullying, about treating people with respect, about recognizing what's wrong and how to report it to their parents, to their teachers, to police officers, how to feel comfortable with police officers. It's a good start in 4th grade before they start revving up and getting to the times when decisions are really, poor decisions start to be made in 7th or 8th grade and beyond. We have SROs in both the middle school and the high school, but they do travel to the elementary schools and the Ryan School when there are issues there to work with the kids and try to get them through difficult times. They're there also to build relationships with the kids and to help them if they're having problems at home or if they're having problems with peer pressure or having problems with their friends. And then I spoke to you already about Maria, who puts presentations together like Hidden in Plain Sight to educate parents on where they may be able to find their kid's stash if they're experimenting with marijuana or other drug use, or how kids hide things in their rooms and hide things from their parents. Obviously tonight we had a little presentation about social media concerns over at the Ryan School. In the past, we've had Chris Heron and Cliff Crosby, who are professional athletes, come and speak to the kids, because a lot of kids look up to the professional athletes, and they've themselves been through problematic times with alcohol and drugs, and they talk about how they worked their way through that, but how it set them back to try to give the kids an opportunity to get a little bit more ahead of the curve on that. Every one of our offices, every single one of my offices has been through a mental health first aid for first responders for youth training, where they learn how to connect with children on the level, especially those that are in crisis, that may have some mental health issues or may have, just be having a breakdown because of some trauma that has happened while they were at school or some bullying or whatever. Maria connects on sports night, so anybody that's here on sports night, you see she hosts an educational table and gets information out to your kids. You see some of the other things that we have. We always have a mock crash up at the high school every other year so that kids get an opportunity to see a horrific incident that involves drinking and driving, to try to provide some education. We have our Substance Use Prevention and Education Month. We do a school poster contest. There's this ongoing SAD project on brain development, and we're always constantly working with the school department to introduce new programs, and we know that the curriculum is tight, and we're always, we're really trying to make sure that the kids have their adequate time for learning, but also to try to give them some life lessons that'll help them. As far as enforcement, every year, because of the level of enforcement that we perform, we get underage drinking grants by the state. We take those grants to go into bars and check and make sure there's no underage kids in there. We call that shoulder taps. We tap on the shoulder of an individual and check their ID. We do potty patrols, so we'll go to parties, or when we know from our SROs there's going to be a party, to try to head off that. Reverse stings, we'll send somebody that looks like they're 15, 16, 17 years old into the liquor stores, but before we do that, we send a letter to every liquor store and every establishment in town that serves liquor and tell them this is what we're going to do, and we need you to partner with us. We need you to check the IDs of anybody that looks underage, and then months after that letter goes out, we'll send individuals into their store, and we're still finding that the stores are selling to kids that look 16, 17 years old. So those people are brought before the selectmen, and that usually results in the suspension of their liquor license for a period of time, just so that they get more keen with the fact that this could result in the loss of a life, so they have to really get on the ball with that. Our department underage drinking policy is pretty in-depth. What we do when we arrive at a house and there's kids drinking, obviously the first thing we do is if we need to provide medical aid to anybody that's intake too much alcohol, that's what we do. The second thing we do is we separate them from the alcohol. The third thing we do is call every single parent and ask every single parent to send one of the two parents down to see us at the location where we're at. When they get to the location where we're at, we have a discussion with them about what we found here, and we see how the parent feels about what had taken place. Hopefully they don't approve that behavior. They didn't approve or have anything to do with the alcohol being provided. And then if the parent feels as though that this is, there'll be some consequences for the student or their son or daughter's actions, we send them home with the parent. and we ask that the parent, partner with us and take good action. The last thing we do is notify our school resource officers, and they notify the school, and the school takes whatever action possible to make sure that there's a message sent to the individuals, because the last thing we really want to do is have to introduce your kid to the court system if we can work our way around it. If we can partner with the parents, if we can make this a one and done, if we can provide the education, get that to you, we do not want to have to introduce your kid to the court system, because we don't want them to have anything, a blemish on their record, any lasting blemish that will impact their ability to achieve their goals. But what happens if it's repeated behavior and it happens over and over again, and we can't form that partnership with the parent? Sometimes it results in the child being charged or arrested. OUIs, there's not much help that can happen there. There's not much of a partnership we're going to form there. If an individual gets behind the wheel and they're under the influence of alcohol, the risks associated with hurting another and themselves are so that that message is sent, generally speaking, with arrest and prosecution. And then diversion, which I just talked about. We work with the DA's office all the time on diversion, so that if it does get to the court level, there's still an opportunity for a child to do something other than have a conviction on their record that will prevent a record from going forward. So the diversion programs at the court that we work with on the DA's office will also help try not to give your kid a lasting record that could impact their ability to get into the service or get into college or become a policeman or do whatever they would like to do. Collaborations, strongest one we have that involves you is the one with the school department. You happen to have probably the finest staff of both the superintendent and assistant superintendent, but all of the principals that work within the school system work seamlessly with my department to try to keep the kids safe and provide them with the best education possible. I feel very fortunate that 10 years I've been your police chief. I feel so very fortunate that the relationship that we've established and built on every single year with the school department is one that I think is unmatched in the state. We're very lucky to have that. They allow us to have SROs in the school. They allow us, Maria Ruggiero, who's our substance abuse prevention coordinator, works with the staff at the school all the time to try to provide new programming. We collaborate with our local businesses, as I told you. We send out a letter to them, and then we also ask them to partner with us. Oftentimes they ask us for a little bit of help, and how do I identify a bad ID? How do I do this? We'll give them and refer them to the right references. Town government, we couldn't have any more support from the town government on our enforcement efforts when we bring a store or a clerk before them and they suspend their licenses because they know that it could impact somebody's life. And parents, another relationship that we really need to be in place is the one with you. And as I mentioned earlier, the district attorney, my relationship with the district attorney is fantastic. We're friends besides being colleagues. We talk quite often. We're at meetings together week after week. We have worked together to create a diversion program in the court. We're constantly throwing ideas back and forth about programs and ideas that we could do to make the area better for our kids. And the Numlick Stars team. For those of you that saw a lot of activity on the news relative to what the incident that took place at the Wynn Middle School yesterday, we partner with Numlick quite frequently, which is a regional collaborative of cities and towns in this area that have worked together to put teams in place, one of which is the School Threat Assessment and Response team, which showed up yesterday and helped us with the rumor of a threat that we had at the Wynn Middle School and helped us make the school safe and helped us with getting the kids back into their normal routine. Counseling and treatment, I'm not getting too much more into that because I'm going to let the DA have her time, and I know you guys, some of you would like to get to a basketball game, but I can just tell you we have a very robust outreach program at our department that you could take advantage of if you need it. We have, like I said, we have a mental health clinician, we have very dedicated police officers, we have a recovery coach, and we have a prevention specialist. They are there at your fingertips anytime you want to talk about anything. You want them to come to your house, you want us to talk to your child, you want your child to talk to our clinician, we're there. This is just an example of the letter. This is the letter that goes out to the proprietors every time prior to an alcohol sting, but every single year it happens, asking them to help our kids get through their prom season and their school year without any tragedies associated with underage drinking. Obviously, we highlight in the press anytime we do take charges out on an establishment, because we really want to have consequences in place to prevent that activity again. Anytime our officers come in contact with anybody that has introduced substances or substances has caused a problem, we have resource cards that we hand out that have all kinds of interesting resources to try to get your kids through strategy. This is just a intake form for our outreach program. I just wanted to show you another little video.
The smell of someone's breath or clothes, bloodshot eyes, slurred words. The symptoms of alcohol or marijuana use are obvious and familiar. But what does it look like when someone is under the influence of an abused prescription drug? The symptoms of prescription drug abuse tend to be more subtle and difficult to identify. The symptoms also vary based on the prescription drug being abused. Some symptoms are visible when a person is under the influence of an abused prescription drug. For example, abusers of all prescription drugs may demonstrate excessive mood swings or hostility. Among people abusing opioid painkillers and depressants, the most common visible symptoms are confusion, drowsiness, poor coordination or clumsiness, and poor judgment. In contrast, the most common visible symptoms of stimulant abuse are agitation, irritability, and appearing to be high, unusually energetic, or revved up. Other symptoms appear as a pattern of behavior over time. You may notice increased secrecy or anger when being questioned about activities or whereabouts, apathy, loss of interest in favorite activities, or a lack of energy, change in appearance, including poor hygiene, drastic changes in eating or sleeping habits, and dramatic changes in school performance, including skipping school. What is more, there may be clues in the home that someone you know is abusing prescription drugs. These clues include cash and other valuables missing from your home, prescription drug bottles without labels or labeled with another person's name, loose pills in a pocket, purse, or bag, and missing pills from a family member's prescription, or having to refill a prescription earlier than expected. Because prescription drugs affect the brain and body, overdoses of these drugs can cause changes in heart rate, breathing, and even death. If a person is unresponsive, call 911 immediately and share your concerns about prescription drug abuse with medical professionals.
And the reason why, and I'm gonna pretty much end my portion of tonight on this, the reason why this is super important, and I want everybody to understand, is I know we talked an awful lot about alcohol, but you saw on the slides earlier, prescription medication is making a strong insurgence amongst teens, and we're seeing it right here in the town of Tewksbury as recent as over the school vacation week. So I think it's really important that we talk about that because it's becoming more of a problem for us than sometimes alcohol. So what I really wanted to do was show that, because I was in shock last week, because there was a 3-day period of time where there was a lot of prescription drug use. And it was Xanax, it wasn't opioids. We know that a lot of the Commonwealth, and at ages that are a little bit higher than this, in this area, we're seeing an awful lot of opioid use and overdoses. Every year for the last 3 years, the town has had 100 opioid overdoses. In 16 and 17, we had 15 and 16 fatalities associated with those overdoses. And last year, we only had 6 fatalities, and I thank God for that, but I also look to our community service unit that provides all of our outreach services, and I believe that they have had a hand in reducing the amount of opioid overdoses. But kids experimenting with Xanax, which are benzodiazepines, they're very, very dangerous. When you introduce alcohol or marijuana with that, very scary. And one of the things that I was reading in a recent police report associated with activity that occurred last week was some discussion amongst the kids that were involved saying they're prescription drugs. They're not going to hurt you because they were prescribed by a doctor. It's not like using heroin that you buy from somebody that you purchase on a street corner, or fentanyl. It's a prescription drug, so how could it possibly hurt us, right? Well, it can hurt you and it can kill you. And super important to us that as parents, that you partner with us not only on alcohol and the social host law about that, but that you keep an eye and keep tabs on your prescription medications that are in your house, and make sure that they're not availed to your kids when they have friends over and whatnot, because that's what happened last week. Some kids took some prescription medication that was in a house that wasn't for them, and they shared it amongst themselves, and some pretty bad things happened as a result of that. So I think it's important that we also highlight prescription drug use, and that we look to you and just remind you that we have a kiosk in the police station that's available to you 24/7 for any unwanted or unused, or if you've run your course on a prescription and you didn't use all of the pills, please bring them so that we can get rid of them, because it's only going to lead to really, really bad things if those things are laying around. I recognize that some parents, in some households, both parents work at a certain time frame and their kids have to be alone, especially on school vacation weeks and whatnot. But if you can safeguard these dangerous things that you have around the house, because it's really important that you do that. We're seeing that at our own level. So, I mean, there is a lot of information on the internet relative to this that I won't bore you with. But there are a lot of kids at parties passing out pills that they don't know what they are, and other kids are telling them they're okay, so don't worry about it, and they're actually taking them, and they can cause some real severe consequences up to including death. So we really want to pay attention to that. And you kids that are in the room, please listen to me. Please, these things are not, if they don't have your name on the bottle, they are not for you. Please don't get involved in touching anything that doesn't belong to you, or letting any of your friends say that anything that you take won't hurt you, because it will, and it can leave a lasting effect on you. The last thing I want to do is just show you real quickly this video. This is
Lucy, I want you to promise me something. If there's any drinking, I want you to say, no thanks, not my thing.
Mom.
I promise you, your real friends won't care. Deal?
I promise, Mom.
They really do hear you.
Did you pack your toothbrush?
For tips on how to start.
So that's pretty much the end for me. The last thing I would like you to do as parents, and your kids might look at me and say, oh God, I hope they don't do this or whatever, but please promise me, because this was also something that played into what took place last week, and I've seen it play over and over and over again in reports that I've read all year long and in the summer. Please verify if your children are going to sleep at somebody else's house. Please verify the house they're going to, that you know the parents that they're going to spend a night with, and that you are sure they went there by a phone call and that they're invited there. Because at times I think it can't happen, but it does happen regularly. It did happen last week where people told their parents they were sleeping at a friend's house and did not end up sleeping at that house, ended up sleeping at a house where an 18-year-old was when his parents were away for a couple of days. So, what can we do? Kids are all looking at us like, Mom, I've never disappointed you before. I've never lied at you before. Why do you have to call? You're embarrassing me if you call Mrs. Such and Such and find out if I'm going there. Why do you have to drop me off? You embarrass me when I drop you off. Please promise me that you will embarrass your children by calling where they stay, by verifying they're staying there, and by verifying there's a level of supervision that you're comfortable with that you also supply in your house. If you can do that for me, I promise you we'll work together and we'll get through this prom season and we'll get your kids to whatever goals they're looking to achieve. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chief Sheehan. Marion Ryan has been serving as the Middlesex County District Attorney since 2013. She is a career prosecutor representing the Commonwealth's largest county with 54 towns and cities. She is recognized for her leadership on the opioid crisis and her innovative programs that address all aspects of substance use and addiction, prosecution, prevention, and treatment. As District Attorney, Marion Ryan has expanded initiatives in Middlesex County, including utilizing restorative justice practices to intervene in the lives of at-risk youth and young adults and expanding diversion. She is an advocate for reforming the criminal justice system to put in place policies to address the collateral consequences for individuals who get involved in the criminal justice system. She regularly lectures and leads workshops on workplace safety, the dangers of prescription drug misuse, teen dating violence, and anti-bullying and domestic violence prevention. Please welcome Middlesex District Attorney Marian Ryan.
Good evening, and thank you for being here tonight. You know, as the chief mentioned, we were earlier tonight at the Ryan School, and I have 54 cities and towns, and when this time of year comes around, I spend a lot of that time out talking to parents. And I'm not saying this because this is where I am, but Tewksbury is the place that I cite to so many schools, and I really want to thank the superintendent and the principal because the auditorium has people here. And I know it's hard to put dinner on the table and get out here, and I know we all got a little confused today about the snow, but really, you should be pleased with the people who are leading your schools because they are making it work and really looking out for your kids, even if, you know, sometimes it's cold and you don't want to do that. And I'm really impressed. This is the third or fourth year that I've been here, and it does really make a difference. And the same is true for, you know, for the chief, for Maria. We partner on all of this. And I never say we want to do something. You know, they've all had long, full days. And this is about something that we want not to happen. And everybody's here. So you really are very fortunate. And you know, we talked a lot, and you heard a lot about the statistics, and we all know some of those things. I'm really here today to talk about three things. The first is, you know, sometimes you'll see us on TV or with the chiefs on TV. When I'm on TV, nothing good has happened. And when that nothing good has happened, particularly when it relates to kids, and I've got a son and a daughter who are now young adults, so I know how hard all of this is. I know all the whining, you're embarrassing me, I know that part. But when you go out, we are out with the chief or we're out with our troopers, and you ring that doorbell or you make that phone call to someone, never once has somebody said, I expected this would be me. I expected something would happen to my child. And that's part of the problem. And you know, for the kids who are here, I've been a prosecutor a very long time. I have prosecuted literally hundreds of the cases of the kind that we talked about, where people have been drinking, they've been using drugs, they've been driving too fast, they're texting while they're driving, there's a terrible accident, people are hurt, they're now in court, there's a lot of crying, the victims' families are crying, the people who are now going to be sentenced are crying. And I have heard those young people say a whole variety of things. I didn't mean it, I wish it didn't happen, I'm so sorry. Never once in 30 years have I heard somebody who's facing that punishment say, this is exactly how I thought it would turn out. This is what I planned. And you know, for parents, we were all teenagers. You see those crashed cars and all of that, you never think that's going to be you. But every year, we make those phone calls, we prosecute those cases, people's lives get changed. And that's why this is so important. Because I was here a couple of years ago when it did happen really close to here. For people who probably never thought they would be touched by that. And for the people who think this is, and there's an epidemic, really, of this. People are going to drink, so I'm going to take the car keys away. I promise you that never ends well. I drank when I was a kid. I understand that people do that. You were lucky That doesn't mean that luck is genetic. And that's a part of what, what the chief was just talking about. Last week, across our 54 cities and towns, we have 250,000 kids from kindergarten to high school. We had any number of episodes where police were finding kids in the middle of the night, 3 o'clock in the morning, out in town, where their parents had absolutely no idea where they were. No idea. And sometimes it's the prescription medication, sometimes it's alcohol. I'm a parent. I get it. It's hard to fight about every issue. You got to get up for work the next morning. It's school vacation. They're up late. It's not really an excuse. And people, I think, also as parents, we take for granted what that last video showed, which is, I am amazed every year. We do surveys across the county of young adults' behavior and ask kids things like, what's the biggest influence? And we all think it's our kids' friends. Over 90% of kids self-report that their parents are the biggest influence. You never feel like that when you say the same thing 1,500 times? But they are picking that piece up. And that's why it's so important that we be talking about it. That's why we do this every single year. And the new piece this year, which is very different and which people have taken a number of different views about, is the prevalence of recreational marijuana. And the very first piece of that being that the law has changed in Massachusetts. It has not changed as to kids under the age of 18. It is still illegal for kids under the age of 18 to be using marijuana, to be vaping it, to be smoking it, to be eating edibles. Any of that is still illegal. And that is probably the single subject where I hear from parents, I smoked a lot of marijuana, it's not going to hurt them. Number one, when we were in college, marijuana had about 3% THC, which is the active ingredient in marijuana. Right now, it's at least 5 times as much. So this is one time when the new and improved doesn't really work. And we used to drive our kids around without car seats. And we used to not put on our seatbelts. We've evolved as to what is safer. The same is true about marijuana and kids. And what I want to spend a little bit of time talking about, which is the piece that I think people often forget about, and this is the time of year that people get caught up in, is social host liability. When you have kids who are underage in your house and they are consuming alcohol or some kind of controlled substance. And the way we get involved in that typically is different than the police department, where they get a report that there's noise at a house or something and they're out there. Our involvement usually comes from the unfortunate bad end. There's been an accident, somebody dies. Even if that is a driver and that's the only car and the driver is the person that dies, we are going to do a full investigation going backwards as to where did that person drink? Where did they get the substance that the medical examiner finds? So we're going to be tracing back through, and this is one place where technology has made our job a little bit easier, because you can tell from their cell phones where they've been. You can tell from the cell towers where they were. Often, and unfortunately, when kids are driving and they've used some substance, they're 4 times more likely to also be texting while they're driving. So they're already impaired, and then they're texting. But it's a pretty clear indication of where they came from and where they were going, within seconds often of when that accident takes place. So we're going to be looking at that piece and really taking seriously, as are in the situation where there's been a crash that's involved somebody else. There's going to, in all likelihood, be a civil lawsuit filed by the family or the people who were hurt. They're going to be looking really hard because the person who was driving, just think about this. You know, you have somebody who gets hurt in the crash. We are fortunate to be in Boston, where we have an enormous range of medical facilities. We don't see as many people die in car crashes anymore, in part because medicine has come so far, and they survive. They survive at obviously a physical cost, but often at a very big financial cost. When you sue the driver of the car or the owner of the car, in all likelihood, what you're going to get is the insurance policy that they have. People might have a $50,000 policy, $100,000 policy. If you're lucky, they have an umbrella policy with their house insurance and it's $1 million. $1 million doesn't get you very far for somebody who suffers catastrophic injuries. It is going to require a lot of treatment. So there needs to be a funding stream for those injuries, for that recovery. Another source for that is going to be the property insurance or the business insurance. So the bar where somebody was, the house where they drank. So there is almost certainly going to be a civil lawsuit looking to recover for the injuries and the damage or in the worst case, the loss of the life of the person who was in that accident. So we're going to be doing that investigation as to where it happened, and then you're going to have sort of a army of civil lawyers who are going to be doing the same thing. And the statute in Massachusetts, and I'm going to skip, maybe I am, let me just pen that off. I'm going to skip to the part about the statute that makes it a crime. And it's very clear. That's section 34, one sentence, illegal to furnish alcohol to a person under the age of 21. So one easy answer when your kids are prevailing on you to have the party, to do something, is it's against the law. There's no, you can see it's one sentence. There's no extra part that says if you promise to be really careful, if you take the car keys and put them in a bowl, if you say everybody has to sleep over, there just isn't any exception. And the other piece is allowing somebody else to drink who's under the age of 21, allowing a child under the age of 21. The statute provides that a parent can allow their own child to drink with them. So if you want to have if it's part of your tradition to have dinner and you have wine at dinner, you could make the choice to let your children have a glass of wine. You want to let your kids have champagne on New Year's Eve, you can make that choice. It is not, that opportunity is not transferable. So I, as a parent, cannot say to you, you're hosting the party. Yes, I know you're taking the keys and you're going to let the kids drink. I'm letting you give alcohol to my kids. It belongs only to you as a parent when they're with you. So you can't pass it off to somebody else. That's against the law. And the second, section 13, is the same with respect to marijuana. And people think that furnish means I have to physically hand you the drink. The case law takes that very broadly. It is when a reasonable person knew or should have known that there was alcohol being consumed. So you didn't let the kids have the party, you're turning a blind eye to the backpacks that are coming in, or you've got a deck and you've got a bucket with adult beverages for the adults who are there, and you've got all the other things in another bucket, and nobody's paying too much attention. It is not a defense that, oh, they went over and took beer out of that bucket. You can't, the law does not allow you to be willfully blind when a reasonable person would have known. So it is a risky, risky proposition to have those kind of parties at your house. Every year, we have the parents who think it might be a good idea to rent a hotel room. You know, there's gonna be renting a hotel ballroom or something after the prom, or they're gonna do some kind of party at one of those events. That is such a risky proposition, not just because of the possibility of you being charged in some way because of that. But I would think very hard, and I say this to the kids all the time when I talk to the kids, I would think about everything your parents have worked really hard for, or you yourself have worked really hard for. Your house, your car, maybe the vacation house, your 401k, all of that, because that will all be in the pot for recovery on the civil suit. Again, nobody plans that the party's going to end in that kind of a tragedy. But you are putting all of that in jeopardy. And it is very, very difficult. Even if you are being vigilant, it is very difficult to enforce that there's no alcohol being spread through the house. I am sure that everyone knows that everybody who brings the Poland Spring bottle into your house has not developed a sudden thirst. That bottle is filled with vodka. The things that are placed outside by the house in the bushes, not spares for later. The backpack that makes its way upstairs. Okay? And it is often more the girls that are carrying the backpacks around, and nobody really wants to say you can't take that upstairs or downstairs. The question is going to be later, would a reasonable person have known there might have been alcohol in that backpack when it made its way through the house? And the other problem is, and this we see this all the time, even if you agree to allow your kids to have a party, yeah, you can have 15 kids over. With social media, it's almost impossible to control those numbers because 15 becomes 30, becomes 45. Sometimes more of their friends and everybody's a great guest. Sometimes people who are mad that they weren't included in the party. We have had any number of cases, ending with the police arriving because, number one, the house has been overridden. Number two, we've got fights going on. The parents can't control them. And in what I really think is the most unfair and worst situation, parents go away and there's an older sibling there. We often have the older sibling who finally calls the police because they realize they've just lost control of it. And the piece that really as a parent is pretty baffling to me, probably some of the most extensive damage I've ever seen to houses has happened as a result of those parties. So, especially when there's nobody home or there's an older sibling there, the houses are trashed. Furniture is cut up, mirrors are broken, absolutely trashed because there's been 75 or 80 kids who've ingested all kinds of substance in the house. Well, I don't know how you replace that because I can't imagine your homeowners is paying for that. So, you know, we hope that you're doing all of these things for the right reasons, but even if you're inclined to give in to the can we have the party, can we have a few people over, there's so much of the furnishing alcohol that's a problem, the social host liability, the kind of destruction that gets wreaked at the house, that's a pretty, it's really a pretty unattractive choice to be making, to let people come in and do that. And then the other piece is that one of the things we hope that people are talking to kids about is, and this is just, that's a list of just the criminal and civil liabilities, but also having the conversations. You know, you saw a little bit in that clip, and it seems pretty easy to have that conversation when they're the size of that girl about make sure you're going to do this. But one of the things we see all the time, and I go around the county and we've put together a program for kids called Smart Choices. And kids helped us put together real scenarios. And the way we engage the kids is we tell them the scenario, and at the end, there are questions. So one of the questions would be, for instance, you know, you're at a party, you're supposed to get a ride home with somebody, that person's drinking, comes the end of the party, you know they've been drinking all night, do you get in the car with that person? And the room is divided up into yes, no, and maybe. They have to take themselves to what the right answer is. I'm there as the district attorney, often the police chief is there. It's pretty clear what the right answer to that question is. No, I wouldn't get in that car. Every place we go and we do that, probably 80 or 90% of the kids would go to the place that they would still get in that car. So then we spend a lot of time talking with them about why. Number one reason is they don't know what else to do. So we spend some time with the kids really kind of role playing. You know, they don't want to be the person, none of us would, who's going to say, well, you've been drinking, so I don't want to get in the car with you. So those conversations that you can have ahead of time help kids kind of rehearse what they're going to say. If they're confronted with that, what we tell the kids when we do those scenarios with the kids is no one gets to 12th grade without being in some of those situations. So what are you going to do when your ride is now very drunk? Another reason is because they're very concerned, number one, obviously, that they're going to get punished. And what we hope the conversation about is, yeah, you might be getting punished, and you're going to get punished tomorrow when we've all calmed down. But if you call me and say you need a ride home, I'm going to come get you, and we're not going to talk about it right now. One of the saddest cases I ever prosecuted happened not very far from here. Exactly that kind of situation. High school girl goes to a party out in the woods, a lot of people there. There's a lot of drinking going on. At some point, she realizes the people that she came with have left. She doesn't have a ride. Somebody offers to give her a ride home. That person's been drinking. She doesn't really know that person. She doesn't want to take the ride. She makes the phone call to her mother. You know, it's 2 o'clock in the morning. Mother's not happy to be woken up, and now to realize she's pretty far from home. There's an argument back and forth. You know, I told you not to go with these people. We all know that conversation. Girl hangs up on the mother. She takes the ride. Truck crashes on the way home. I can't imagine losing a child, and I can't imagine losing a child after that conversation. So they can't be so afraid that they won't call you. And the other thing that kids tell us all the time is the reason they don't ask for help or they don't report what's happening is, and everybody I would venture to guess who's a parent has said this, you hear something bad about somebody that your kid is friends with, and your response is, that's it, I never liked that kid anyway, you're never going anywhere with that kid again. Well, that kid's their really good friend. And when they're not doing whatever is objectionable, they really like them. And they correctly think that if they tell you, you're going to cut them off from them. So you've got to have that conversation. You know, maybe you don't let them go places with that kid. Maybe you only let them see that kid at your house. But because you're angry and you think they're the bad influence that you want out of their life doesn't mean your kids feel that way. And kids all across the county tell us the same 3 answers for why they don't make that call, why they get in that car. And every one of us has seen those crashes or read what happened and thought, why did they get in the car? We know why that is. So the other piece is that for kids, you know, as hard as the chief said, as embarrassing as it is, as it is to try to figure out what the excuse is, Think about that beforehand, because you're not going to get out of high school. If you haven't already found yourself in that position, you are going to be in that position. Have the answer ready. The other piece is that, in one of the pieces of legislation that we sponsored last time, the kids need to be thinking about, those are the signs of an alcohol overdose. Kids often don't recognize those. Even parents, we have lots of issues where kids are suffering from alcohol poisoning in a house. Put the kid to bed, let them lay down, they'll feel better. The single biggest cause of a bad result of either death or some very serious injury happens when the kids lie down and then vomit, and actually aspirate on their own vomit. So people don't recognize that, and they lay them down, and in the morning, we find kids on the couch or in the basement who gag during the night. The other piece of it is, when, worst case, you find yourself in that situation where you have somebody who's suffering from that. And this is particularly true for the kids. We sponsored this legislation last year that the governor signed into law, and we did it after a party in Everett about 4 years ago. It was a party in Everett, parents went away. It was a social media explosion party. There were about 100 kids in a 2-bedroom apartment. Police got called for the noise. When the police came down the street, the kids went everywhere. They scattered. It was an unbelievably freezing cold night. The kids took off through the backyards, took off running. They did not stop to gather their coats as they were running. The girls were, of course, wearing jeans and camisoles. They were not dressed to be outside without their coats. As they ran through the backyards, one of the girls collapsed. The friends were afraid because the police were getting closer. They ran. What saved her life was she collapsed between a car and a house in the driveway, in the place where you could not be seen. Even though the police circled around the neighborhood, they could not see her. She was out there for about 3 hours. What saved her life was the woman who worked in that house was a nurse. Ironically, there had been another big crash. She got called into work. In the middle of the night, she went out to her car to get in her car to drive to the hospital. As she did that, found this girl between her house and her car. In an amazing recovery that can only be attributed to the fact that she was 17, after 4 months at Mass General, that girl eventually made it back home. But literally every ounce of blood was pumped out, had to be warmed and pumped back into her. That's how close she was to freezing to death. Not one of those kids went home and told their parents, we don't know where she went. She fell down in the driveway. And when we do that scenario for kids, kids tell us that they would run, that they would not report that. They will not report it because their parents would be angry. They would not report it because they fear the athletic consequences that they were at the party where there was alcohol, even if they weren't drinking. My goal is punish people later. It's to get everybody home safe at night. That's why we passed this legislation. If you are under 21 and you are with somebody who needs medical attention, we want you to call the ambulance. We will not prosecute you for the alcohol you might have consumed, for the alcohol you might have brought. It is more important to get help. You might have seen last winter, we must have had 3 or 4 girls that were left sitting on sidewalks, in fields. One of them actually died because her face went into a puddle while she was passed out. All completely and totally preventable because kids were just too afraid to say they left them behind. So this law gives that opportunity to have that safe harbor the same way as we already have a statute where if you see someone suffering from a drug overdose, you can report that without being prosecuted. And finally, I just have a list of resources for you to take a look at. We really do know how hard this is. And we know how you think your kid's a good kid. They would not do this. They have a nice group of friends. I keep a good eye on it. And we know as well that every single spring season, we respond to these. Our goal is that everybody makes it through the night safely. So thank you again to the school, and thank you all for being here.
Before everybody heads out, just one last thing. I know the DA talked about it, but I just wanted to let parents know that it is the policy of the Tewksbury Police Department every time we do go to a house where there is an underage drinking party to hold the responsible party responsible by charging them criminally. So we do have that policy, so we're asking that you partner with us and not do that. So thank you very much.